No, no. Just want to give everybody a few minutes, those who are entering, just to choose the channel that they want to hear the presentation in. Okay, so welcome to Transition Tuesday. Tonight we have Tom Cosker, who is with DRC Connecticut, Disability Rights of Connecticut. Tom is an advocate and has been working with disability rights for about 3 years now. And he really focuses much of his work in the areas of education and employment. And he serves on many transition task force, many board meetings, and a whole host of other things. So welcome, Tom. And if you would like to say anything else about yourself, we'd be happy to hear from you.
All right, thanks for having me. Again, Tom Cosker, Disability Rights Connecticut. Like she said, Gloria said, I'm an advocate. So we have a lot to cover tonight. And, you know, as I was putting together this presentation, there's always so much to talk about. And I had a million slides and I trimmed it down to 500,000, but it's still way too many. So I might speed through some of this. I'm assuming you'll get a copy of this slideshow anyway. So some of it will be good resources for you guys as well. So I kind of left some of the stuff in there. So I will get right into it unless anyone else has anything else. Are we ready to rock and roll?
Yep, I'm going to post the PowerPoint presentation in the chat as well.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and share screen and get started. And we will have time for Q&A at the end. So I will, we'll have time for that at the end. In the meantime, if you have questions, you can try to throw them in the chat and someone will be monitoring the chat as we go along. So again, Tom, Disability Rights Connecticut, talking about transitioning into the workforce. Let me just advance my slides here. Hold on one second. So a little bit about DRCT. We are Connecticut's protection and advocacy system for people with disabilities. We work with individuals with disabilities of any sorts of disabilities in all age ranges, from birth to death. We are a legal advocacy organization. We're independent, nonprofit. We're not associated with the state of Connecticut. We're federally funded by a number of different entities, which are listed here, which aren't exactly important to you all, but there are a number of different funding sources, and they're all federally funded. So again, our job is to identify and eliminate barriers that people with disabilities face. And I'm going to pause here real quick, as this is the Spanish version of that same slide. Most of the slides will have Spanish and English together on the same slide. But of course, Tom put too much on some slides, so they couldn't do that. This is a quick thing. Our mission statement, again, our mission is to advocate, educate, investigate, and pursue legal, administrative, and other appropriate remedies to advance and protect the civil rights of individuals with disabilities to participate equally and fully in all facets of community life in Connecticut. We could dissect that for a while. There's a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of important stuff. Again, here's a Spanish version. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Again, lots to cover. I'll try to get through a bunch of this. First off, known individuals' rights under the ADA. Again, this is all focused on employment, transitioning to the workforce. In the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, there's a lot in there. So we'll try to kind of at least hit some highlights. Again, we could spend 2 hours just talking about the ADA, but we'll kind of touch on a little bit about it tonight. Also, just again, know and understand available resources in Connecticut, and then different agencies and organizations that can help with employment. Again, if you've been to other presentations, you can spend hours talking about this, and there's many and many. I'm going to touch on a few of them. Mostly focused around the vocational rehabilitation system in Connecticut. And lastly, a little bit about where we can help in that regard, where Disability Rights Connecticut can help. And we have a couple programs, one called the CAP, C-A-P, and one called PABS, P-A-B-S-S programs. So we will go over those as well. All right, the ADA. The ADA kind of just on a general level, on a high level, it forbids discrimination based on disability in any aspect of employment. And this is important to note because sometimes people don't understand that you have the same protection. You have these same protections during the application process, although they do vary. You have protections, though, during the application process against discrimination, during hiring, during training, and then during any term or condition of employment. So anything that you're doing that's associated with your employment, whether it be a training session that you might be having, it could be, a job. What I was going to say, when they have like a happy hour sort of thing, but if it's a job sponsored, an employer sponsored thing, your rights are still there. So the ADA, under the ADA, you're protected in all of those areas. Now, of course, oftentimes it comes in a question: what is a person with a disability, and do I qualify under the ADA? And in order to qualify as an individual with disability under the ADA, it's fairly simple actually. Can that person, first of all, with or without a reasonable accommodation, and we'll talk about that in a minute, perform the essential functions of the job, okay, that you have or that you want. So I'll give you an example. If there's someone who wants to be an astronaut and they have limitations, physical limitations that would preclude them from being an astronaut. And I fully believe that, everyone has a chance to do a lot of things in life, but there are certain things that, someone with particular physical limitations might not be able to do. And I'll say astronaut might be one of them. And NASA is not required to give you accommodations necessarily to become an astronaut if you can't perform the essential functions of the job, of which there are many, of which I know I can't do, but maybe 1 out of the 100 that are involved. So you have to be able to perform the essential functions of the job, even if you're applying for that job, right? So you have to be a good fit for the job from that respect. The other thing that's important to note, especially in this audience, I think, is that the ADA applies to individuals who are employees, quote unquote employees, and this includes interns or other paid work experiences. And this comes into play a lot with youth and folks in transition age, that they're doing these jobs that are not quite a full-time job yet, right? They might be a part-time job, that might be an internship, on-the-job training. If you're getting paid for that work, then your rights are protected under the ADA. If you're volunteering, that's a different story, right? So it wouldn't qualify under the ADA if you're a volunteer. There are other protections that exist under federal law, but the ADA applies to employees. So as long as you're getting paid. Reasonable accommodations, just some general things. Both the employee and the employer must act and communicate in good faith. Okay, so an employee or prospective employee can assume that the employer knows what they need. Can assume that the employer knows they need an accommodation. You must proactively reach out and ask for that. Now, having said that, as you see in the next bullet, it says when a person with a disability requests an accommodation or an employer suspects a person may need an accommodation. So that's important because often an employer will know, right? Let's say someone is deaf or hard of hearing, right? And that employer should suspect that that person who's deaf or hard of hearing may need an accommodation. So there's an expectation that an accommodation might be needed. So the person might not have to specifically ask for it. That employer will have to kind of engage in a communication and a back and forth about that. And again, the individual and the employer, they need to initiate and engage in this. It's called an interactive process, is the language in ADA. There has to be a back and forth, which is very important. If someone does go to an employer and say that they need an accommodation for this and such, and the employer says no and moves on, that's not an interactive process. If they say, well, I'm not sure we can do that for you, but we can do this for you. We might go to, what else can we do? How can we work with you to help you in this situation? That would be an interactive process, and that's what's required under the ADA. And I'll have some examples here in a minute. What is a reasonable accommodation? Here's kind of a definition of it, but any change to the application or hiring process, to the job, to the way the job is done, to the work environment that allows a person with a disability who is otherwise qualified for the job to perform the essential functions of that job and enjoy equal employment opportunities. Again, back to that thing I mentioned earlier, the person has to be otherwise qualified, right? You have to be qualified to do the job. You have to hold all the other qualifications. And if you can do the job with an accommodation, then great. If you can't do the job anyway, with or without accommodation, that's a different story. A big thing is what does reasonable really mean, right? And some of the language they use in the ADA is that it does not create an undue hardship. And there's also this direct threat, not a direct threat. So it could be a direct threat to other employees or the supervisor or employers or to customers. If their accommodation might create a direct threat to them, then they wouldn't have to provide that accommodation. But the undue hardship's a little tricky, and I won't go into big details on it, but it really depends, right? What's an undue hardship to a small mom and pop bookstore with 3 employees is different than what's an undue hardship to Amazon, right? Amazon has a lot more resources. They have a lot more people to cover shifts. For example, one accommodation sometimes is certain shift hours, right? Certain work hours, accommodating someone so that their work hours can work around physical therapy appointments or doctor's appointments. That's a typical accommodation someone might ask for. If it's a small mom and pop shop with 2 or 3 employees, that might be unreasonable, right? That might be an undue hardship for that employer. And they might side with the employer in that case. But a larger company, even a Stop and Shop or Target, some of the bigger companies that have a lot of workers, they can work a lot more easily because they have a lot of employees. So it really depends on the size of the company, on the cost of things. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But that's just a little bit about that. And that's the Spanish version of that slide. And what I'll do is when I get to the point at the end of this ADA piece, I'll pause for questions, maybe, if that's okay, Laura and Jen. I might just pause for questions on this piece before I step into the next part. How do you request it? How do you request a reasonable accommodation? There's nothing magic about it. You can just simply say, I need help or I need assistance. You can say I'm having trouble with, working on the register, for example, due to my disability. You don't have to make the request in writing. That's not necessary, though we recommend it strongly, as with many other things in life, that you document it. So it's a good idea to make the request in writing, so there's a record of it, so you know when it was made, so that later on, if there's discussions about, did you ask, what did you ask for, etc., that it's done in writing. So we definitely recommend that. But there's really no magic to it. It's just, I need help. You don't have to cite the ADA and I need an accommodation under the ADA. It doesn't have to be anything crazy like that. It's nice too. If you can do that, the people might take it a little more seriously. I bring this up again, especially important as this transition age, folks, is even when you're applying for a job, you can ask for accommodations, right? You can ask for accommodations of filling out the application and doing an interview, whether that be, again, interpretation, ASL interpretation, whether it be a certain location for an interview, whether if you cannot do it or can do it online and preferred online versus in person for an interview or filling out an application, you can ask for accommodations for those things. In this case, it's really the responsibility of the employee or the prospective employee to tell the employer, because they're not going to necessarily reach out to you, asking if you need an accommodation during application. If you don't need an accommodation, you don't need to disclose your disability, right? This is an area that people ask us about a lot, is, do I need to disclose and let them know I have disability? No, you don't. Certainly, if you ask for an accommodation, then you're probably going to need to disclose that, right? You're disclosing it by asking for an accommodation, just by nature of your request. And just the last note I put on here is, many employers, so many, and hiring managers and et cetera, supervisors are unaware of the ADA and people's rights under the ADA. So it's really important for you to, be that voice for yourself, for others, and educate. Again, we do that at Disability Rights Connecticut, and a lot of folks are out there doing it, but still we come across companies every day, all the time, that have no idea. Even large companies, right? Because they're made up of individuals and people and HR managers who may not know their stuff very well. Companies are required to have an ADA manager, supervisor, but most often people don't even know who they are in the organization. So kind of important to note. Oh, and this is the Spanish version of that one. Again, one of my slides with too many words on it. I'm trying to pause. Jen, where am I pausing? Going slow enough? Trying to pause and go slow enough. Couple examples of accommodations, and there are many, and I'll give you some resources that are great resources to look at, to think about what accommodations a person might need. But written job orders in place of verbal orders, very simple one, for someone who's hard of hearing, for example. I've had this case a number of times where an individual is hard of hearing. The boss tells them, his jobs for the day or his tasks for the day, and a simple he wasn't getting it. Excuse me, couldn't hear it. So he asked for a simple accommodation of giving them in writing, and the employer typically would provide them to everyone in verbally in a little morning meeting, and they weren't used to doing that, and they gave a little pushback, but they ended up doing it, and it was a very reasonable request, and it was nothing that was undue hardship at all. Again, I mentioned this one, flexible hours to accommodate therapies, very common one. Again, they don't always have to do it. Just because these are things that can be asked for or might be done by employers, there's no right to get everything that you want and ask for, right? So flexible hours is a great one that a lot of people could benefit from. If you need it, again, due to your disability, right? If it's because of your disability that you need to, even flexible work hours because of a person's disability, in terms of some folks might not do well in the morning, right? So they might need to start work later, have a later work shift, for instance. It happened a lot during COVID, of course, during the last few years. Working from home was an accommodation that people were asking for. It has to be a request for an accommodation that's due to your disability, though. It can't just be because I like to work at home. Again, accessible facilities, a very simple one. ASL interpretation for virtual meetings, another very common one that we see all the time. Here's some great resources, and then I'll pause a minute, but so think about any questions you might have, but here's some great resources for the ADA and accommodations and stuff. Ask Jan. Job accommodation work is a great one. New England ADA Center, and there's a couple others there, so you can access those resources. It's where I send a lot of clients to these resources, so they're pretty good. I'm going to skip a couple of these. If you disability discrimination, so this comes up often. Again, we get calls on this a lot. If I do feel I was discriminated against or feel someone was discriminated against, the two places really to file a claim of discriminations are the Connecticut Commission on Human Rights and Opportunity, which is CHRO, or the initials, Commission on Human Rights and Opportunity, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Now, a couple quick notes on that. The Commission on the CHRO is a Connecticut organization, and they look at discrimination based on a number of reasons, whether it's disability, race, et cetera, and they do across employment and across kind of everything. It could be in housing, it could be any number of places, education. That's CHRO. EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they focus just on employment. They're based out of Boston. That's like a New England branch of the EEOC. So they cover a bigger area. In Connecticut, if you file a complaint with one organization, it's duly filed automatically with the other. So you don't need to file with both. But you can figure out what makes most sense for you if you do have a discrimination claim. So that's a little bit about that. And here's the Spanish version of that. And of course, you'll get these slides.
And we do have a few questions.
Excellent. And I'm going to skip these, but some resources from American Job Centers, Job Corps, BRS, and BSB. My little disclaimer. I'll leave the disclaimer up while I'm answering questions. Perfect.
Perfect. Is it okay with a parent of the employee to be part of the interactive process between the employer?
Yeah, absolutely. And whether it's a parent or someone else, right? It might be a parent, might be an advocate, and we get involved at times, with the employees and employers. Could be a parent, could be a friend, could be spouse. Spouses are involved. Anybody. There's not this requirement, as many of you probably know. There's not a requirement that the employer listen to that other person, right? That parent or family member or whoever. But usually employers are happy to have someone else there at the table speaking with them, on behalf of that individual. So yes, they can definitely be part of it. We recommend that all the time to folks. So good question.
And there's another question. How do you prove your child has a disability if it's social emotional? Show the IEP or psychological diagnosis.
Again, if you're talking in terms of employment, first of all, you have to think, what's the accommodation that they need in that employment? Do you have to show proof? And basically, I guess the question is, what proof do you have to show that they have a disability, right? And there's no magic thing. It doesn't say I need a doctor's note or a neuropsychs eval or anything like that. There's nothing in the law that says exactly what you need, because it really depends, right, on the disability. And there's such a wide range of disabilities. Usually an employer, most of the time, will take the word at face value. If they don't, then some sort of professional evaluation or something, any of those things would work. If you have an IEP, great. I mean, you have an IEP and your child's still in school, then great. Then you have an IEP to show the employer, and most employers, they won't know what an IEP is. Chances are, unless they're in the education world. But that would work, I think. Again, there's no list or answer to that specifically, but I think any of those things would work. Any other questions? That's it for now. All right. All right. Well, that is the, what do we start at 5 after? That's like the 24-minute quick version on the ADA. Again, we do sometimes presentations that are much longer and more detailed. And, if you have more questions on this sort of stuff, you certainly feel free to call us and ask about it. If you have specific questions about your case or your situation, you can feel free to call us. But yeah, we could spend hours just talking about this. So next I wanted to, again, I was trying to hit a couple of the highlights on things that we do at Disability Rights Connecticut. So the next kind of area I wanted to touch on is employment services, okay, for people with disabilities in Connecticut. And there are many. This is by no means the list, but these are a couple Connecticut agencies, starting with vocational rehabilitation, which is located in the Department of Aging and Disability Services, ADS. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Of course, also the Department of Developmental Services. I'm not going to cover that today, but it's another agency that does a lot of employment services for people with intellectual disabilities, and some others who are on waivers. Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Again, I'm not going to cover that today, but they do provide employment services for people with mental health diagnoses. And then there are many others, okay? Again, agencies and nonprofits and stuff that provide services. Again, I'm just going to kind of touch a little bit on the vocational rehabilitation, because that's an area that we do. So we do work in the other areas as well. This is an area that I've done some work in. So I'll kind of touch on this today. Where do you get VR services? And I don't know, have you guys had a presentation by BRS and BSB at all in the past on this? So I would imagine.
Yes.
You did, right? I might have even attended one. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I'll just quickly touch on this, but there's two agencies, okay, within the Department of Aging and Disability Services. The Bureau of Rehabilitation Services, BRS, and then the Bureau of Education and Services for the Blind, BESB. BESB, as it says, works with folks who have sight impairments, and BRS works with kind of everyone else, that might qualify for services. Much like a lot of things that you learn about later on as, students transition to the quote unquote adult services, they're not entitlements anymore. They're eligibility based programs. A little bit about what services they can provide. This is a whole bunch of stuff on the screen right now, but there's a lot they can provide. Again, this is specifically, now I'm talking about BRS and BESB, but they do vocational planning, career counseling and guidance. They do, connect people with work experiences in high school and after high school, training and education. I've had folks that get, colleges paid for, college classes paid for, by these agencies, or other training, opportunities. There's job coaching, job placement. Of course, job placement, that's their ultimate goal, is to place you on a job. So that's an important part of the service they provide. Supported employment. There's lots of things that VR can do for you. VR, vocational rehabilitation. And there's the Spanish version of all those things. How do I get VR services? Well, really, it's, I'll say, as simple as, or potentially as complicated as, contacting BRS or BESB. You can go online, find the office near you, and make an appointment to fill out an application and talk with them. For many of you that are working with students of transition age, you're involved with Level Up, which is a transition age program that BRS offers specifically. That's not a BESB program, that's a BRS program. And hopefully, if you have a Level Up counselor in your school that's working with the students, they can help connect you with the adult services for BRS. They will not fill out the application for you. They will not do it for you. The hope is they point you in the right direction, connect you with that program, the adult services program. But I tell folks it's on you, right? As with a lot of other things, it's on you and your family to connect with, reach out, ask for, and apply for services from BRS or BESB. And then there's timelines on it. They have 60 days. Once you apply, once you fill out a completed application, they have 60 days to decide if you're eligible. And there's a lot that goes into this. And if you have questions on it, we could talk. You can call it, talk specifically. So different things that will consider to determine if you're eligible for services. And so they'll look at medical records, they'll look at educational records, they'll look at information that you provide in the application process, maybe even via an interview. Usually they'll do some sort of a face-to-face, whether it's virtual nowadays or not, is fine, but with the applicant and their family or other advocates, and other determinations by other government agencies. So they do take into account if you're getting services from another agency. The counselor observations, so usually even at this application process, you're interacting with a counselor during the application process, and their interactions with you and observations, are information they'll use to determine eligibility. If there's not enough information available, additional assessments may be made to determine if you're eligible for VR services. And I'll give you an example. Someone moves from another state, someone moves in from out of the country, and we've had these cases, often. If they don't have enough information to make that determination, they can do evaluations and will do and have set up evaluations. So to be eligible, again, I'll kind of go quick, but an individual has to have a physical or mental impairment, which is a substantial impediment to employment. And there's specific language that defines what that means, a substantial impediment. And you need also, that individual needs vocational rehabilitation services to, and what it says, prepare for, secure, retain, advance in, or regain employment. So it's not just, often we think of BRS and BESB as preparing for and securing employment, right? Like I'm getting ready. They're going to help me do all the things I need to do, help an individual prepare for and get ready for a job, training, etc., and then getting a job, right? Applying for, going out looking for and getting that job, maybe even doing a little job coaching initially, some initial job coaching to get you in a good place in the job. But they can also help with retaining a job, right? If you get to a spot in your employment and you're not working with BRS anymore or BESB, and you need some more assistance for some reason, whatever reason, your disability, the job changes, the task and responsibilities change, and you need some more assistance to retain that job, to keep that job, you can get assistance. Even to advance in, right? If you want a promotion, if you're looking at, excuse me, moving from one, position and kind of moving up in the organization, BRS and BESB can help you with that. Or regaining if you've lost your job and get back to work. All of those are situations where they can help. The last of these three things, you have to have a substantial impediment. Well, you have four things. You have to have the impairment. It has to be a substantial impediment. You have to need rehab services in the first place, which is kind of obvious, but you have to be able to benefit from vocational rehabilitation services. Now, this is a little tricky, and we often hear clients who come to us and say, BRS said I can't benefit. And who makes that determination? BRS really makes that determination, but if you are a person with a disability, it should be presumed that you can benefit from services. Like you're going there with these challenges, and that it should be presumed, and that is in the language that it is presumed that you can benefit from BRS services. It doesn't always come out that way, but that is an important thing to note. And associated with that is if a person, there's a special rule for Social Security disability income recipients, SSDI, and supplemental security income, SSI, beneficiaries. So if someone is on either SSI or SSDI, and they're applying for services with BRS or BESB, they're presumed to have a physical or mental impairment, which is a substantial impediment to employment. That's a presumption that's made because you've already gone through the process and gotten these benefits from Social Security. And it's also presumed that you would need vocational rehabilitation services to prepare for, et cetera, employment. So there's a presumptive eligibility kind of clause or piece within the regulations around SSDI and SSI recipients, which is important to note if you are in that boat, right? If that individual is in that boat, kind of helps get you in the door, so to speak. Where does disability rights come in is we have a program. Laura, go ahead.
Okay, great. I didn't want to interrupt you, but
That's okay. I saw you.
Because we have a question from Allison. Both the children are existing clients of BESB. Do they still need to apply for vocational rehabilitation services, or does it roll over when they turn, and I'm not 16?
Yeah, so I would say it can go smoother. My experiences are that BESB goes a bit smoother than BRS. I'd say a bit is more of an understatement. It goes quite a bit smoother. But don't assume it's going to roll over. And there are different kind of groups within BESB, and I'm not aware of all of them, to be honest, because I haven't worked with the youth services within BESB as much. So I'm not exactly sure how that transition goes, but I know there's like adult services side of adult programming at BESB, and then there's vocational rehabilitation part of BESB. And you can be receiving services from one or the other. So it might smoothly transition you from the youth services to the adult services, but not the vocational rehabilitation. And I know those are two, I mean, they're under the same BESB umbrella, but they're slightly separate. So I would say don't assume that you're going to be automatically smooth right over that 16. I would reach out to your counselor and ask them and say, what do I need to do to ensure I get adult services and or voc rehab, which are two separate things, right? You might get daily living skills and stuff like that, assistance from adult services in BESB, which is a whole different thing. But then voc rehab is specifically on employment. Because not everyone wants to get employment either. So they don't automatically put you into the employment program, voc rehab, because that person might not want to gain employment. Certainly at 16 or 17, they might not desire to go there because they might still be in school. Yeah, I hope that answers that question. Anything else? set? Awesome. Yeah, interrupt anytime you need to. So at Disability Rights Connecticut, again, we have a number of different federal funders, and one of our funders pays for us. The Vocational Rehabilitation Administration pays for us to run this client assistance program. We call it CAP because everything needs acronyms and initials. But this helps applicants and consumers of Connecticut's voc rehab agencies. So we can help individuals who are working with BRS, who are working with DESB, and we can also help people who are applying for services with either of those agencies, and help people understand their rights and responsibilities. And sometimes it's when there's a conflict, people call us when there's a conflict and there's issues with their counselors or services or being provided or not being provided. But those are all things that we can help with under this program within Disability Rights Connecticut. And because my slide had too much information on it, there's the Spanish version in a separate slide. Because not only do I talk too much, but apparently I type too much too. This is an important note. In some of you may have heard of these independent living centers in Connecticut, and there's 5 independent living centers around Connecticut. And there's a state independent living center council or whatever that kind of is the umbrella organization over them. But these independent living centers are also we can assist clients or people that are getting services from these independent living centers as part of our programming. So if you're having issues with them, you can also call us. We can assist the client. Those are great resources and great groups that can really help folks out a lot as well, which I won't go into that in detail. So what can we do specifically? We may be able to help if you've been denied your request for services, right? You've applied and you've been denied. You can call us and we can try to help you with that. I'm not saying we can get you back services, but we can help you with the process. You've been offered fewer services than you think you need, right? They offer you this and such, and you feel like you need extra training, extra on-the-job training, extra classes, whatever. You are already found ineligible, and you disagree, right? You think you should be eligible, right? As caseloads go up and people's work lives get busy, it happens, right? There's communication breakdowns, much like there are in schools, so we can help you with that. This is an interesting one. You've been offered an employment goal that is not in line with your skills, interests, and abilities. Very often in the world, as most of you know on this call, I'm sure, of people with disabilities, people are put into positions that may not be what they really want or are suited for. And they might be put into a position and provided an employment goal, I should say, that is not really what they want, but it's what someone else thinks that they want or thinks that they can do. So the bar is set kind of low, and they put a goal on there and I won't even give an example because, every person has a role and every person's job's important in my eyes. So, but it's a position that you feel you can do more and want something different, right? And I want to go into graphic design, and they had you working in retail, for example. I said I was going to give them an example, and I did. So if you're not interested in working in retail, but your goal is in retail, well, that's a problem, right? You need to kind of have your goal lined up. So that's an area we see happen often, and we can assist just with that conversation and communication with BRS or BESB. There's this thing called order of selection, and right now the state of Connecticut is not under an order of selection, but when money is tight, to put it simply, when money is tight, they try to prioritize who they provide services to. And it depends. They need to provide services to the people with more substantial impediments and substantial limitations in their disability. And there's this order of selection process. So if there's issues with that, we can help. And also if they close your case, very often clients feel like their case has been closed too quickly and they want it to, kind of stay open. We can assist with that. Okay, wow, I
Do
got
you
through that
have
one.
a
So that's the end
couple
of
of
the cap.
questions?
Go ahead. That's the end of my cap thing. Yeah, sure.
So someone wants to know, how does one access CAP?
Yeah, you would call Disability Rights Connect, which I'll give you our contact at the end, or you can go on our website. Actually, our website's super easy and nice to connect with. There's requests for services on there, so you can put a request in. I will, in full transparency, say we're buried right now, so we're not super quick on getting back to people at the moment because we're so buried with our intakes. But someone will get back to it at some point. But put in there that I want assistance for, as a client of BRS or VESB or whatever, and looking for CAP help. You can do, there's an online submission form for assistance, or you can call, or you can email. There's a bunch of different ways. What else you got?
The other question is, it's my understanding when a child turns 16, they can participate in their school's transition level up program. I was just informed by the school that they changed the age to 18 now for him to participate. So he has to wait until 18 to participate in transition work program, ?
Yeah, give me a call. I'm not aware of that change in age. That's news to me. As far as I know, it's 16 still, and you should be able to participate and level up. I'd be curious, was that a level up BRS person that made that decision? Was it a school person that made that decision and said that? Is it school policy? To my knowledge, it is not a practice of level up or a policy of level up at all. So I'm surprised to hear that.
Right, I am as well. And also, just because the school district or level up is participating does not prohibit the school district to provide transition service, employment services, or training.
That's correct.
So it's not an either or.
Yes, correct.
Responsibility still resides on
correct.
the school
And most folks that are getting level up are getting transition services and employment, pre-vocational employment services from their school district as well. And those can start as early as 14, as many of you know on the call, and those can start as early as 14. And so no, whether or not you participate in level up, and most folks don't do it as early as 16. You're eligible, you can do that. And again, not sure why they're saying that, but you should be able to. But some wait until 18 or 19 or 20 because they might be staying in school until they're 22, so they might not connect with level up services till a bit later. Depends on the individual, depends on the situation. You can definitely get that as early as 16. So I see no, but yes, not mutually exclusive. You can be getting both, and they usually work together, right? You can do an employment and a job experience with level up, and then you can do the same with your school, and students do this all the time.
Right. And someone actually chatted that
any other questions?
Their child has been participating in level up since 16, and they are 17.
There you go.
Okay.
So it's happening some places. Yep. Yeah, we know it's happening in most places. So I'd be curious to the district and stuff. And just call them out and say, hey, wait, you should be able to get it. Should be getting it. Are eligible.
Right.
Now it might be a staffing issue or something. Who knows what the reasons they give you are, but should be eligible.
And I'm feeling they're going to be calling you.
Yeah, sure. Anything else? No? All right. So I have one more piece I want to talk about, and it's a mouthful, but our protection and advocacy for beneficiaries of Social Security. It's called our PABS, PABSS. So we can assist, kind of as I said before, under the CAP program, but this is a little bit different. Beneficiaries of SSI or SSDI, all right? So two different Social Security programs. If you're a current recipient, not if you're an applicant, you have to be a current recipient of receiving benefits from SSI or SSDI. We can assist. This is a little bit of kind of mumbo jumbo, but people with disabilities who have Social Security, who receive Social Security, they have a hard time when they're looking for work and deciding whether to work. There's always that question, right? I'm going to lose benefits from Social Security. How much am I going to lose? Is it worth working? How much can I work? So much involved in that. So this program was established back in '99, and this other Ticket to Work program was established, which again is a whole nother program in Connecticut and across the country. And the Work Incentive Improvement Act. There's a lot of things to try to help people get off Social Security or even reduce Social Security and get to work, right, and find employment. So this program allows us, Disability Rights Connecticut, to help provide information and advocacy and other services to help beneficiaries eliminate barriers to obtain or maintain employment. Okay. So within this program, there's quite a bit we can do, actually. Oh, this is a little slide I throw in, like, why work? Because some people are like, you know, we hear this question like, well, I don't work. I'm getting my Social Security. I'm happy. Well, get more money, increase your income, increase self-esteem and self-worth, socialization, of course, increase independence. You know, there are many reasons to work. These are just four, but I don't want to preach and get up on my soapbox, but employment, good, right? Employment, good. Involvement in the community, good. So what can we do, right? What can Disability Rights Connecticut do under this program to help SSI and SSDI beneficiaries? Okay, we can connect you with Ticket to Work, which is a whole network, employment network of providers and benefits counselors that will assist, and this is really run through Social Security Administration. That's who runs that program, to help you get to work. Right. And it's not just like it sounds. You get a ticket to work, you get a little ticket and someone helps you out. A provider helps find you a job, right? And helps prepare you for a job. We can talk to you about work incentives and what work incentives there are. And again, to get into details now would just be too much, but there's a lot that goes into that. Maintaining your Medicaid benefits, right? While working the MedConnect program. We can help with, as I kind of mentioned in the voc rehab piece, the CAP and the voc rehab piece is referrals to voc rehab, right? So we can help with that if you're even under this program. So we can kind of help those folks under both programs. And we can help with provisions of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, right? Help people understand the ADA and make sure that their rights are realized. Their ADA rights are realized as a prospective employee or an employee. Wow, that's a lot of words. What is Tom thinking with all those words on a slide? So we can answer questions that you might have as far as other resources, help you work to eliminate barriers and eliminate discrimination, help you with, you know, kind of refer you to file discrimination complaints. We would not take discrimination complaints ourselves. We would refer you to, again, as I mentioned earlier, either CHRO or EEOC to file discrimination complaints. But we can provide some direct advocacy. We also collaborate, you know, with other advocates, with employees, with employers, to identify kind of big systemic issues. And this is a lot of the work we do as well in this program. And a lot of the work we do at DRCT actually is kind of systemic in nature. So we'll look for gaps in services and issues in the system and help on a systemic, larger level to make changes for people with disabilities. Yeah, let's see. Again, provide public education and training like this, for instance. We can address a little bit housing accessibility obstacles. We do this here and there, not a ton. We can't like help you find housing necessarily, but we can refer you to places and assist with talking through how housing accessibility might be a barrier to your employment, right? Or regaining employment. We can talk to you about strategizing about transportation, which is a huge issue at all times for most every person with a disability. But that's often a barrier for seeking employment. So we can talk to you about some of that. So, oh my gosh, there's all stuff we can do. Oh, this is one that we try to help out with as much as possible, is folks who are incarcerated or who were incarcerated and help them move towards employment. It's a big need across the country and in Connecticut. Again, navigating transition services, which is what we're talking about here today. Assist you in building your self-advocacy skills. Again, we don't do direct services to provide those self-advocacy things. We'll do a little bit of assistance with that, but we can provide connections. We could support individuals in use of assistive tech and connect you with resources on that. Oh, and this is my little disclaimer thingy that the SSA, Social Security Administration, makes us put in here, that this is funded through Social Security Administration. and they reviewed this, and it's all legit. We're wrapping up. We're getting close. I've been trying to check my pace and not go too fast, because I tend to go too fast. But I'm kind of wrapping up here towards the end, so get your questions ready. But these are some areas we don't cover. And I kind of hate putting the slide up there, but it's like we have to, because people call us for all sorts of things called Disability Rights Connecticut. And they call us for all of these things on this list. And we can't help with any of these. We're limited on what we can help with by what our funders give us money to help with. And if our funders who are paying us, giving us the money to do this work, don't say we can't do it, then we can't do it. But bankruptcy, criminal law, family law, identity theft, evictions, we'll refer for most of this stuff. We'll just refer you somewhere else. But obtaining guardianship, personal injury, property, all these things, right? Social Security, disability determination. Someone will call and say, hey, I was determined ineligible. We can't help with that. SSA is not paying us, giving us money to help with that. You just can't, wills, malpractice, and there's other things, but this is just a kind of I would say short list, even though there's 18 things on there. And again, I hate putting this list up of all the things we don't do, but it really helps just eliminate those calls coming to the door, me telling you over the phone I can't do it. I'd rather you know before you call that we can't help with that. Oh, I can plug. This is my quick little plug. So CPAC was gracious enough to put this information on their social media and flyers and such. But right now, Disability Rights Connecticut, this is a non-employment plug here, is running a free education rights clinic. So we have a clinic that's open with advocates and attorneys and law students, providing information to students and families of students with disabilities. You could have an IEP, or you could have a 504, or need a 504, and you'd be eligible for this. You would talk to one of us for an hour, in a 1 hour meeting that we would set up. We have, I think, daytime and evening hours, both. But we answer questions, review what your options are, review IEPs, some, self-advocacy tips, explain your rights under, special education law, etc. Oh, that looks really small. But to request an appointment, you can go on our website. You can check the CPAC flyer too, because it's in there. But there's a link to, you can email us. There's a form you can fill out online as well. And there's a phone number. So there's all different ways to get a hold of us. If you do need accommodations, disability accommodation, or an interpreter, there's a phone number there you can call. Again, it's on our website. If you need accommodations or interpreters, we can provide both of those as well. So that's a little plug about our clinic. Now it's any questions. So let's see. There's my contact information at the end. So now it's any questions. So that was a lot. I made it in less than an hour. We started late, so I'm proud of myself.
Good job.
For getting through that.
The contact slide back up, because I know we had a couple of questions about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's I don't know why I put my direct number. God knows why I put that on there. That was just not smart on my part, because I'm going to get too many calls. But our general number is in the nice big blue box on the right. Might call that first, because we might get better luck. No, but my direct number is there on the left. My direct email and phone number. Again, on the right is, our general number. We have video, phone, toll free, website, email, the whole bit, whole shebang. Yeah, feel free to call, email, etc. If you do reach out to me directly, I think, as with a lot of people, phone calls are just really tough to get to. But shoot me an email, explain that you saw me here and what you're calling about, and that'll help narrow down or get to the right person, because I'm not always the right person to answer the questions either. We have a number of advocates and attorneys that work on this stuff. Okay. So I can leave it on here for questions, because the question slide is just basically the stuff I talked about today. So I'll leave it on this slide.
Absolutely. So we do have one question,
and then, yeah, happy to answer the question.
Where should someone start? Which agency? DDS, BRS, SSI, etc. It's a very confusing process. And I would have to say, yes, it's very confusing, and it just depends on what the disability is and what services you're looking for. But Tom, I'll let you speak to that. You might have better.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is very confusing. I think there's a lot. I think this period of time, everyone on this call knows it's a challenging period of time during transition. Um, where do you start? I would say there's some hope that maybe your child's school and special education teacher / case manager might be able to direct you. But it depends on disability. So with DDS, if the individual has, is eligible for services, which is an IQ of 70 or below, then they would qualify for services under DDS. And there are some waivers, that autism waiver and such, or some other waivers that you can apply for to get services. But generally speaking, if the individual has an intellectual disability, then DDS would be one place to start. I recommend doing both. And when I say both, also BRS in the case of someone with an intellectual disability. If you do not have an intellectual disability, if you're looking for employment, you can go to BRS, again, call, et cetera, BRS. And I recommend doing both because I think they can both provide different things, to an individual. I think the SSI is a whole separate thing, right? Whether you want to apply for SSI benefits, that's a whole separate conversation and discussion. If you're going to work and to any extent number of hours, then you might not need SSI because you're going to work. Right. So it really depends on the individual. If someone decides not to work, but they want to try to apply, then you can contact SSA and go to the website and apply for services through the SSA, Social Security Administration. So yeah, I mean, it really depends. Again, if you're an individual with a mental health diagnosis, then you might be applying for services at DMAS, right, at the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. You might, again, it's really individualized. You might call the independent living centers. The independent living centers are a great resource to help people depending on what you need, depending on what that individual needs and where they're headed, right? They're not going to help you with employment necessarily, but might help you point you in the right direction for other resources in the community. Again, if you have a diagnosis of autism, there's some great resources I would point to for that person, right? That could provide. If you're a person who's deaf, then there are other resources. It does really depend. There's no one answer, but it depends on disability, depends on what they're looking for. There's a million resources. Go to our website. I mean, I say this and not to just slough people off to our website, but we have as many of these agencies do. We have I think a really good website with a lot of good resources. And it's you can kind of tag and look for education or look for whatever employment, and there'll be a bunch of resources on there that might help. Again, that doesn't give you the direction of which one to start with, no. But I think it'll help. Yeah, I think it'll help. That kind of answers it. I rambled a little bit.
Next question is, does your office also help with obtaining driver's license? If not,
No.
do you have a suggestion where we can go for help? Our son can drive, but cannot pass the learner's permit due to the type of testing. And I believe that the actual driving test, both written and driving, will be a challenge.
So no, we don't provide direct assistance or help. Off the top of my head, I can't think of the name of the place, but there are, and if someone on the call knows it, that you can help out.
Easter Seals. There's a couple of them.
Help Tom out here.
This person.
There you go. There's a couple programs that do provide assistance and training and et cetera to prepare for and pass the test. The other thing is you can ask for accommodations, which these other groups would kind of help with that process. But, the ADA, we're talking about employment today, right? We talked about employment, but the ADA applies across the board, right? So it applies in a lot of, there's, different parts of ADA that apply to different public agencies and private entities, et cetera. So there are rights protections under the ADA for, applying for and getting your driver's license. And again, I'm not an expert in the area as far as what's a reasonable accommodation to request and such, if they're, have trouble passing or drive, whatever it is, but there are resources out there. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head of them, but again, Laura mentioned Easter Seals, and I know there's another one that was like something. There was another driving thing that I
There is,
can't
I
remember
have to
what it
dig
was
it up.
through DOT did something, or DMV. I can't even remember what it is, to be honest. I don't
And thank you,
recall.
Jen, for posting that in the chat. She posted the Easter seals information. I was just going to mention the transition program of the school district. There might be, depending on the goals and objectives, they might address some of that challenges as far as taking the test or learning some of the information about driving.
That's a great point. That's great. Certainly, they help with transportation as far as learning and taking public transportation. That's a very common, you know, thing that transition programs provide. And you know, some of the voc rehab can provide some of that as well, right? DDS and voc rehab can both provide some of that public transportation training. I know that's separate from the question you asked about the driving license, but sometimes it's important to kind of consider both, you know. Any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Oh my goodness, you telling me that Tom is like
I see.
wrapping up short here? Like
I know, I see one.
I didn't talk enough. You guys want me to talk more?
Our school suspended work options because of COVID. At what point do we ask to have accommodations so our children can access this important experience?
It's never too soon. So yesterday, yeah, I mean now, ask now. You know, your school suspended them. A lot of places did, a lot of schools did, a lot of them are back up and running. So, you know, for variety of reasons, different districts are bringing things online at different times. You know, I know a lot of employment providers that took very little time off. I mean, they stopped in, and I'm talking on the employment, the adult employment provider side, but they took time off in 2020, but they were up and running pretty darn quick. You know what I mean? As the individuals were ready to come back on board. And some employers were slow coming back and such. And sometimes it's the employers, but yeah, I would ask now and yesterday and say, you know, this is important. Really, if your child is still in the and has some time left, some chunk of time left, then you have the benefit of that, because you know many missed out on it, you know, and they missed that 6 months or a year that was critical. So definitely now ask, get them back online, get everyone else in the district asking, because there's no reason to me, in my mind, there's no reason they shouldn't be. Everyone's looking for help right now, for crying out loud. No one can find enough help, so you definitely need our folks out there. Now's a good time for people with disabilities to get jobs, right? I mean, unemployment's low, everyone needs help. Every place you look is looking for help. So this is get out there, you know. Any other questions? Come on, I know I see some familiar names on this call too, so don't be shy asking your buddy Tom here a question.
Nothing's in the chat.
Nothing's in the chat, and no one wants to speak.
I see a shout out. Hi, Tom.
Well,
from Anita.
Yeah, I'll give a quick shout out to, you know, a couple of my peeps there. Nita, hello Nita, and Brian Smith. It's been too long. How are you, Brian? Hope all's well. All right. Well,
no question.
We can sit here and you can look at me for another 21 minutes, or we can, you know, get ready for bed, so to speak, because it's getting late for Tom, I know. But no, you know, again, I did zip through a lot of this. I could have spent a lot of time just on the ADA, you know, just on accommodations, whether it's applying for or
I have another
getting
question.
a job, etc. Please.
Sorry. So
Yeah.
regarding Level Up transition, I will contact the Level Up link or aging services.
That's the question. Who do you contact? Yeah, I mean, you can contact the BRS Level Up. So there is a Level Up supervisor whose name I think is online. I don't want to say it because I'm not sure. It changes, things change so much. I don't want to say somebody's name and be wrong. I knew who it was the last time I checked. But yeah, you can contact Level Up directly. Though you should also contact your school district and your case manager, special ed teacher, or supervisor or director of special ed or whoever that should know who the level up. Now, having said that, BRS and level up specifically, it's a challenge, right? As everyone is challenged right now, keeping staff on board and staffing it. And I think there were 8 or 10 or so level up counselors around the state covering the whole state. So many of them have a lot of schools to cover and a lot of individuals to cover. And they don't necessarily, and then if it's a new person that just came on board 2 months ago, that creates a whole, set of challenges. And we've seen clients who say, I don't even know who mine is. It's like, well, DRS hardly knows who it is because they just got hired, what I mean? So they're constantly, that happens, right? Turnover happens. So if you're not aware of it, ask the district for sure. They should know who the level up counselor is. And if they don't, then call BRS directly. And you can ask BRS, and I think if you call, you can ask for level up or look online. I think there's a thing to call level up directly and talk to the supervisor who runs level up. But there should be someone covering your school for sure. For sure. There's definitely someone on paper that's supposed to, BRS doesn't do quite as nice a job explaining that like online. And like if you go to DDS, they're like territories are very well defined and marked, and everyone knows kind of who covers where. BRS, it's a little trickier. I think things are in flux a little bit more, but they know, they're aware of who's covering what. Tom was finally smart enough to open up the chat box over here. Yeah, there you go. Aaron Murata. Yeah, I mean, if there are no other, Ruth, it was Ruth the last time I checked too, Jen. I didn't see put that in there.
As far as I know, it's still.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. I know there was a question about the driver training. It's an assessment that they'll evaluate their skills as far as driving and how to operate a motor vehicle, but it's best just to reach out to the program to discuss specifics. And I know Jen posted to the Easter sales program.
All right. So yeah, I guess my contact info is on there. I heard Brian Smith kept you up late when he did his presentation. For those of you who were at Brian Smith's presentation, that he kept you going late and long from what I've heard. So Tom's going to get you to bed a little earlier. And yeah, I mean, unless you guys have something else or other questions, I'm happy to hang out for a little longer.
Any other questions, Jen or Juanita? Anybody have any questions?
My apologies to Juanita and is it Sandra or Sandra for my rate of speech, which has been known to be very fast. I actually did work at it to try to keep it slow, and at times I got reminders and I tried. So my apologies if I was too fast. You guys are miracle workers with people like me.
I think I have a question that just popped up.
All right, let's keep them rolling.
What would you recommend for a 16-year-old just beginning the transition process? What?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this: if you're just beginning the transition process, I mean, number one, you're doing good. You're starting it, right? You're starting it. You're talking about it. I would say, again, work with your students, case manager, special ed teacher. Start talking about and figuring out yourselves, right? For the student and for yourself, what do they want? What do they need? Where do they see themselves going? Much like any student would do, right? And I say this to a lot of folks, much like any student would do that's going through this period of transition, they're 16 or 17 and they're going to college or job or wherever they're going after they graduate, whether your individual student is graduating or not, right? At the end of their 12th grade year, you still need to have those plans. So they need to know, think that through. What do they need? Are they looking for employment? Are they looking for post-secondary education of some sort, whether it's a 2-year, 4-year? Look at those things and start figuring out what they want to do, then go down the path of what resources you might need. Again, assistance at school if they have an IEP, right? And great, then they can get the services through the school district. to those transition goals, right? We could talk all day about transition goals and objectives, and you should have them, that you do have them, you should have them, that they would be remiss not to have them in an IEP for a 16-year-old. They'd be in trouble basically, but they should have those. And make sure they're good, and that, you know, you agree with them, and that they make sense, and then work towards those.
Yeah,
But start thinking about, even early, start thinking about what.
Yep,
Go ahead.
and actually, we'll be talking about transition services and goals next month in October. So we will have Tim Doyle here to discuss all of that. So
Yeah. And Jen threw a post in there, a link in there for the special ed secondary transition thing for the State
great.
Department of Ed.
Yep.
So it's a good resource. And, you know, and Lindsay Malone, you know, I finally got the chat open. I'm looking now. You know, the east side of the state doesn't have as many resources. You know, yeah, I hear you. You know, the quiet corners don't, you know, the Northwest doesn't, the East doesn't. It's tricky. You'll keep trying, you know, God bless, good luck. You know, I could say just be happy you don't live in, you know, North Dakota, where you're like 3 hours from a place that, you know, like you're way out there. We get a little spoiled in Connecticut. Yep, you're an hour, you know, it's tough. I know it is. There's less providers, there's less services. I hear you on the frustration, and transportation is an issue as well. And again, we're always advocating for around the state. You know, we want to hear from you guys, and we want to help. But it is certainly tricky. I hear that. And everything else was just simple stuff, right? All right.
okay.
Last time we paused, we got another question or two. Nothing else? We good?
Yep.
Going once. Going
Does Brian
twice.
have any
Anita Sella
questions?
giving me thanks. Good to
No.
see you, Anita. See you around town. All right. Well, thank you all. Much appreciated. Again, there's my contact info if you need to contact Disability Rights. Sign up for that special ed clinic if you're interested in that. Yeah, that's, you know, specifically on education is that piece. So again, Juanita, thank you for dealing with the super fast talker.
I have the same
Much
problem.
appreciated.
I understand. Well, thank you very much, Tom, for coming and speaking to us. And again,
You're
next
welcome.
month on Transition Tuesdays, we will have transition services and goals in high school. And following month, November, we'll be talking about the new IEP and transition section. Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay. Have a wonderful night.